Hi and welcome to this masterclass brought to you by Mindvalley. I don't know how you found us, but I know why you're here. Like many people who watch this masterclass, you might be going through or have gone through a breakup, a divorce, or the end of a relationship. And it's one of the toughest things we can go through as human beings. In fact, studies show that very often when you go through the dissolution of a relationship, whether it's a divorce or it's a breakup, the stressful effects that it can have on your being is the equivalent of the death of a family member. And it's a really tough time that I recognize you might be going through, which is why this masterclass, I believe, might be just the answer you need to help with that process of healing. 6 months ago, I ended my marriage. Now, a divorce is never an easy thing. Me and Christina, my ex-wife, we were married for 16 years. We were in a relationship for 19 years. That's almost 2 decades, and we have 2 amazing kids. And the funny thing is, in the years before we were about to divorce, I guess both of us knew that something was off, but both of us were afraid to bring it up with each other. In our minds, we had been conditioned to believe that ending a relationship was going to seriously hurt our kids, that we were going to end up battling with each other, that lawyers would have to get involved. But the reality was quite different. When our relationship ended, when we sat down and had that difficult conversation, we decided to do it through a process called conscious uncoupling. We feared the reaction that our parents would have on this, the reaction that our children would have on this. And they were maybe upset or concerned for about a day. But when they saw how we went through this conscious uncoupling, we actually invited 50 friends over and had a celebration party. Everything shifted. They were able to see that we were going to carry on as human beings deeply connected to each other, just in a different label. And now it's been 6 months, and people still ask me, is everything okay? And the answer is things couldn't be better. We take holidays together with the kids. Our kids barely notice that their parents are divorced because they still have us both together. I cannot express to you how what I feared and what the reality was so different, because my fears were societal conditioning. But the reality, conscious uncoupling, was something so beautiful. I am still in awe and gratitude every single day that things ended this way for me. See, the average American, statistics show, is going to go through 3 relationships in their lifetime. So, like it or not, if you're going to go through 3 relationships in your lifetime, at least 2 of those, you're going to go through some sort of ending a relationship. Why buy the myth that this ending has to be painful and ugly and hurt you for years and years? What if these endings can be fully conscious? I've heard theories from different spiritual philosophers that say that when you end things in a conscious way, you give your soul, you give each other room to fully express yourself in the world. And I never realized the impact that this energy would have on stuff outside our relationships. But it was amazing to see how every aspect of our lives, from our health to our business, exploded and became better, healthier, and more fulfilling after this breakup. So Mindvalley, of which I'm the CEO, doubled in the last 6 months. Christina's career took off. She launched a new website, she's writing a book, she's going on tour, speaking across the world, and I'm so proud of her. And that brings me to Katherine Woodward Thomas, the woman who's changing the world's conversation on breakups and divorce. In this masterclass, Katherine is not just going to teach you how to uncouple in a beautiful, conscious way, but if you're someone who many years ago went through a breakup, know that some of the negative energies associated to that you may still be carrying with you. You are going to learn through conscious uncoupling how to heal that, even if it happened decades ago. Now, let me tell you about Katherine. Katherine Woodward Thomas is the author of 2 New York Times bestsellers. The first is called Calling in the One, which, as the name suggests, is about calling in the one. The second is on conscious uncoupling. Conscious uncoupling, as an idea, became massively popular in 2014 when Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin went through their conscious uncoupling, and Gwyneth credited and spoke about the process. This has led to Katherine's books changing the conversation on breakup for millions of lives. She is also a licensed marriage and family therapist and a teacher to tens of thousands of people all across the world. She shared the stage with Neil Donald Walsh, Jean Houston, Mary Morrissey, and other extraordinary teachers. And she's been featured in the New York Times, Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, the Today Show, Washington Post, the London Times, Women's Health, and countless other media outlets. And Katherine has raving fans all across the world, including people like Marianne Williamson, who recently was in the Democratic Party debates. Marianne Williamson said, "Through conscious uncoupling, we can transform the deepest disappointment into a sacred journey from sorrow to peace." John Gray, author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, said, "It's a compassionate guide on how to overcome breakup grief and use it to transform and enrich your entire life." He also went on to say, "The process will not only make your heart whole again, but will also ensure a positive, hopeful future for all involved." Ariel Ford, the best-selling author of The Soulmate Secret, said, "Katherine Woodward Thomas reveals the transformative steps back to a life of love, freedom, and happiness." Alanis Morissette, the Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter, said of Katherine, "Her knowledgeable, visionary, and clear teachings have consistently represented empowerment and healing to so many, including myself." Gabrielle Bernstein said, "It'll help you embrace the true meaning of forgiveness and restore your faith in love." And John Gottman, who wrote the book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, said, "It presents a sensible and helpful 5-step approach towards turning the tragedy of a breakup into a new, healthy beginning." Experts all around the world rave about Katherine Woodward Thomas's work. And her work has had such a profound impact on my life and my family's healing, which is why it was so important to me to bring Katherine Woodward Thomas to Mindvalley. We are so excited to be introducing her work to millions more individuals through this online platform. I'm so excited you're here on this masterclass. Let's welcome on set Katherine Woodward Thomas. Welcome to Mindvalley.
Thank you so much. It is so good to be with you.
I'm so excited to have you here because you've just had such an incredible impact on my life.
It's very moving for me to hear you talk, really.
And I've introduced you in your story, but I know that there's much more to your story than what I was able to share. I'd love for you to share it in your words with the audience.
Well, so I became a teacher really through my best-selling book, Calling in the One. And I wrote that book when I was in my 40s because I manifested a miracle after decades of really disturbing, unfulfilling, frustrating, disappointing patterns in love. So I created this miracle for myself. I married this wonderful man. I had my first child when I was 43. We bought our dream home. Then I wrote this book about it. Became a bestseller around the country and then around the world. And then 10 years into that marriage, my husband, as I call him affectionately, and I decided to divorce.
Wait, say that word again, husband?
My husband. My husband.
Right.
So we decided to get unmarried. And I had all of these students from all around the world, and it was kind of an existential crisis for me. I thought maybe I would lose my career. I think we're all inside of this idea that all of our relationships are meant to last forever. We're inside of the myth of happily ever after. And so I, like everyone, assumed that it would last forever. But the truth is that people change. And I really began to change quite a bit after I was married. It was like the foundation of that marriage allowed me to blossom, and I started to grow and develop myself in directions that weren't really that interesting to Mark. And so at one point, we just decided that really where we were most connected and most bonded was around our love for our daughter and our shared commitment to her. And we looked at each other and we realized that in some ways at that point, the marriage was actually holding us back. So we asked ourselves, did we still need to be married? I was terrified of divorce too. And particularly, my my parents divorced when I was very young, and in a very antagonistic, hostile way. They had custody fights over me. My father and mother were so much at odds that after a few years, my father just threw in the towel and gave up his parental rights entirely, which broke my heart as a young girl. And Mark had also had a similar experience where he lost connection with his mother. So we both had these really horrible experiences in our childhood. And so we just kind of looked at each other and said, well, is it possible to live happily even after? Like, could we actually align upon a shared intention to have our daughter have a happy childhood and create a happy post-divorce expanded family? And I'd never seen anyone do that before. And I had some doubts about it because, I mean, my breakups in the past had been just heart-wrenching. I broke up with one boyfriend and gained 50 pounds and then dreamt about him for decades afterwards. And then another boyfriend that I had for a time, when we broke up, I lost half the hair on my head from grief. I stopped eating or sleeping for a year, and I started smoking cigarettes again. So I was anticipating a lot more drama when we broke up. But inside of that shared commitment, we just started doing it differently.
That's really intriguing because what I recognize that you're doing, and if you're watching, I want you to pay attention to this. I noticed that you questioned two big rules. The first rule is, and this is such credit to you and Mark, both of you as children saw your parents go through an ugly divorce. And you questioned that. You said, well, does it really have to be ugly? What if divorce can be fully conscious and healing? I want you to ask yourself that question as well, and just play with that possibility. Now, the second thing is, you question the idea of happily ever after. You, me, all of us are trained to believe that once you get into a relationship with someone, it has to be forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And if in any case of that relationship parts ways, we have somehow failed. That's the grand societal narrative story that I've come to realize, and I think all of us are starting to wake up to, that we are brainwashed into believing. What if relationships could actually be part of our soul's journey to be with someone, to learn to grow with that person?
Well, so how I began to question that was I started to notice that I felt this sense of failure and this sense of shame and social embarrassment. I mean, and then I had the added layer of being a teacher of love,
Right.
which was a whole nother complexity. So I started to, at some point, ask myself, because I know that shame, when we feel shame is about violating other people's standards, external standards. Guilt is when we violate our own standards. But shame is a social construct. And so at some point I asked myself, whose standard am I holding myself accountable to? And I realized it was this happily ever after myth. So I got curious and I decided to research it. And I found out that it was constructed about 400 years ago, came out of Venice, Italy, at a time when half the children were dying before their 16th birthday, which basically meant that the lifespan was also less than 40 years of age. And, you know, inside of that kind of a context where all these children are dying from illnesses, it makes sense to begin to promote the idea that people would stay together forever because you'd give the children a better chance of survival. The other social thing that was happening at the time is that there was a very locked-in class structure. So if you were born in poverty, you were surely going to stay poor and die poor. And there was actually a law on the books that forbid a noble person to marry a commoner, which meant that there was no hope of ever getting out of it. And if you notice, happily ever after always ends with a commoner marrying a noble person and coming into great wealth. So at the time when they were created as a form of literature, they just spread like wildfire because it was an escapist fantasy to alleviate some of the suffering of the day. And what I've learned, because we're all here, we have an evolutionary mindset in our community. We're looking for how can we make the world a better place. We recognize that conversations change in the world. And so I began to wonder, well, if we're changing our diets and our exercise program and our educational practices, why are we not changing the goals of relationship if serial monogamy is indeed the new norm? Very few of us are going to just meet and mate with one person and stay with that person forever. And as you said, most of us are slated to have at least 2 or 3 relationships in our lifetime. However, inside of the happily ever after assumption and the assumption of failure if a relationship ends before one or both people die, then we haven't actually figured out how to do this well.
You're right, and that's so interesting. So what you mean by serial monogamy is the new norm is that we no longer live in that world where we live only to the age of 40 and then drop dead. We're going to be living to about 100 to 120 based on modern science. That's an awfully long time to be in a marriage that might be lukewarm.
Well, and the other thing that's really playing upon us, since the relationships have really changed more in the last 50 years than in 5,000 years before that. So if there was a poll done back in the 60s where young women were asked the question, if you met a man who met all of your criteria for a mate, but you didn't love him, would you marry him? And over 75% said yes, they would.
Wow.
So think about that.
And that was the 1960s.
How different. Now, if you poll us today, the number one thing is we want love. Mm-hmm. We want a soulmate. We want a best friend. We want someone who's a spiritual companion that we can grow with. We are not looking at just being in a role-based relationship anymore. We have changed to a soul-based relationship. And that means that we have a deep desire for authenticity, for togetherness, and that will require that sometimes we need to let each other go. So I think as evolutionaries, we understand that it's up to us to co-create the future that's bright for our children and our children's children. And so a lot of these things that are no longer serving us, we're deconstructing them and recreating them to be much kinder and more in alignment with the ethics of love.
That is the happily ever after myth. And study after study after study shows that being in a bad relationship is worse for your health than breaking up with someone. Now, Katherine, what would you say to people who might accuse you of encouraging divorce?
Oh, I always like to tell people I am pro-marriage. I actually still teach Calling in the One. I'm pro-long-term love. I examined even my own part in how Mark and I drifted apart because I'm always a student of love, and I believe in commitment. I'm pro-marriage, I'm just not pro-misery.
I love that. Be pro-marriage, but don't be pro-misery. And, if we want to be realistic about it, not every marriage is going to last. And when it comes to that end where it's rocky, all we're saying is you don't have to end it in agony and pain because that will stay with you for a while. You can do it consciously. And you're going to get the tools on how to do it in this masterclass.
I can just say that breakups are a crossroads, and many will go on to live a lesser life in the aftermath of a breakup. So conscious uncoupling, this conscious way of doing it, actually ensures that you and everyone involved are going to come out of this unscathed, undamaged, and even expanded in your capacity to love and be loved moving forward.
And that brings us to the second thing, right? The second big lie. And just thinking about this will heal you in some way. And that is that it's okay to hate the person you once loved.
Okay, so let me just explain to us. So we're looking at things from an evolutionary perspective. And one of the things that we have to recognize is that 1,000 years ago, if you wandered away from your tribe, you probably would die. So when we go through a breakup, we actually feel like we're going to die. It's like an evolutionary hybrid. And so what happens is the body and the brain go into high alert. And we're flooded with those hormones that would have us go to war. Nature has designed us to stay connected for this reason. And I'm convinced that our soulmate to soul hate phenomenon is nature's trick to keep us just as engaged with our former partner as we were when we were in love, because hate is not the opposite of love. Hate is just as engaged and invested in emotion as love is. But the opposite of love is actually indifference. When you stop being so invested, you take your energy back. So that is something that in order for us to live congruent with our ethics of love, we are going to have to consciously effort to doing, because most of us would aspire to an amicable breakup, but many of us cannot actually do it because of what's happening in our brains and in our bodies. So we have to recognize that as people who are consciously evolving culture, that many of the things that we're feeling are kind of organic, but they're things that we have to massage and work with. So the reason we don't want to hate our former partner is that it will really dim down our chances for love moving forward. We don't want to be taking those negative emotions that are kind of festering within us into our next relationship. It will make the next relationship, going into that relationship damaged from the start. I always say that our next relationship will not begin when we meet our next partner, but with how we end with this one.
Oh, that's so beautifully said. And it's crazy how so many of us came to believe that grand myth. What I learned from your work, from Conscious Uncoupling, was really the competition of kindness. When me and Christina split up, we would compete, not in a bad way, but compete with kindness. We would do everything we could to support the other person. As I was flying here to film this masterclass with you, I got stuck. All of a sudden, there was a parade in the city and I couldn't get an Uber. And I immediately called up Christina. And she had just come back from surgery. She was getting into the front door. She had just come back from a small little like medical procedure. And she immediately got in a car, drove to where I was, picked me up from the middle of the street, drove me to the airport and back, because I couldn't get an Uber. And she's the reason we are actually able to film today. And I remember getting out of that airport and rushing to meet my flight and just telling her, thank you. You totally saved my entire weekend. And she just smiled back. And that's what I mean by competition for kindness. And I want to thank you for introducing me to that idea, because I dread the thought of what it might be like if I had fallen for that societal myth and believed that we needed to blame and hate on each other after our divorce. What you just said about how your next relationship begins with the ending of your current relationship, that brings us to the third myth that you speak about in Conscious Uncoupling, which is that time heals everything. Let's talk about that for a moment.
Well, look, just imagine if you broke your leg. You wouldn't just kind of lie there and say, well, let me just let time heal my broken leg, because your leg would heal crooked. And you wouldn't really be able to run or walk the way you'd done before. The same with a broken heart. Broken hearts need a lot of tending to and a lot of care. Otherwise, they can heal a little bit too defended, moving forward, a little bit shut down and guarded. So we want to make sure that we don't just leave it to time to do our dirty work, because there is a very common phenomenon called complicated grief or prolonged grief, where time will diminish the acuteness of the pain that you're in, but you'll end up living with kind of a low-grade depression, a kind of a deep longing, a mistrust of love moving forward. So it's a very common thing for people to have that experience.
And this is a real thing. The Mayo Clinic writes about it on their website.
It's very common, yeah.
But what you're saying is that when we go through the right process, which is conscious uncoupling, we heal that. And I want to stress something else. So this is really important for everyone listening. After I went through conscious uncoupling, me and Christina went through it deliberately because we were going to go through a divorce that we had consciously decided upon. But what was interesting is, as you go through the conscious uncoupling process, and many of you are going to be enrolling in our 5-week conscious uncoupling program here on Mindvalley, you will find that this is not just for you if you are going through a divorce now or considering one. It is for you if you've gone through any form of breakup in the past. Because almost all of us go through breakups in a way where it hurts us and we carry some of that baggage and some of that emotional wounding and some of that grief with us into life. Katherine, I'd love for you to share, because we were talking about this before, Monique's story, about Monique and Larry.
So Monique came to me just knotted up with anger towards her former husband, Larry, who she'd been with for 5 years. And they had a son together, Zachary, who was just maybe 2 at the time, and he had Down syndrome. And their marriage had broken up, and in the beginning, Larry was supporting them, and then at some point, he just stopped. And it was a huge crisis for Monique because she was dependent on Larry. She stayed home and took care of Zachary. She didn't work, and it was a big crisis. And of course, everybody in her community was mad at Larry. And even Larry's mother was mad at Larry. She stopped talking to Larry because he refused to send Monique any money. So, a lot of the things that people do to us in a breakup are justifiably, anger-provoking. And his behavior was difficult and bad, and nobody really understood where he was coming from. But when she was willing to do conscious uncoupling, one of the things we invite people to do is to take responsibility for your part. And so, on the surface, it looks like he's just being a bad guy. But Monique had a very hard upbringing. She actually was raped. She was born to a father who was a drug addict and a mother who was a prostitute. She has memories from when she was 2-year-old, standing in front of an open refrigerator looking for food because she was hungry, all by herself in the kitchen. So she had, when she went to take personal responsibility, she had the insight that in her whole life, no one had ever really been there for her. And people had let her down over and over and over again. And she carried that unhealed place into her relationship with Larry. So when they were first married, she quit her job. She refused to work. She just wanted him to take care of her. Like finally she could have someone just take care of her. But it was kind of a wounded story that was living in her, so it was insatiable. It wasn't like he did it for a time and then she got back on her feet. These wounds are kind of like bottomless pits in us. So in some way, she had kind of decided that Larry was her ticket for the rest of her life. And even after they were divorced, now they had this differently abled son, and she was going to take care of the son, and so he was going to, take care of her for the rest of her life. So he rebelled against that. And she saw that on some level he had been trying to tell her that. She remembered that even before Zachary was born, he used to say to her, please, please, Monique, go out and get a job. You're a competent woman, you're smart, you're powerful. Why are you just living off of me? But she wouldn't have any of it. So she realized in that moment that the cost to her and to Zachary really was her power in life and her calling and the potentials of her life. And so she decided to not live from that 2-year-old place anymore and to really rise into who she actually is. And so she began to work. And she created this amazing, since then, she's created this amazing entrepreneurial business as a life coach. She's very well known. She's very sought after. She writes blogs. People love her. She has a huge following. She makes a lot more money than Larry ever made. And They have a great relationship co-raising their son together.
That's remarkable. And that's actually one of the principles you teach in the program.
Yes, to reclaim your power in your life, you have to look at your part of things. And sometimes that's hard to do because we're so focused on the other person and what they're doing that was wrong, that they shouldn't have been doing, or they're misbehaving, they've hurt us in some way.
I remember a quote from your work that talks about this. You said, even if your partner was wrong 97% of the time, you were wrong 3% of the time. You want to own that 3%.
Well,
that was eye-opening for me.
I'll tell you why that matters, because until we look at our side of things, and very often it's covert, we didn't speak up, or we turned away from the red flags, or we ignored our deeper knowing, all of these or we were over-giving to try and prove our value to someone, all of these kind of covert ways that we throw ourselves under the bus. On some level, if our focus stays on the other person, we will feel intuitively that we cannot trust love moving forward because we have not grown past that. And we are likely to do that again with someone new. So even though it's just a small percentage sometimes, you can get your life out of that 3%. And you really want to be able to see what that is so that you know the amends to yourself moving forward, so that you can trust yourself to never ever make that mistake again.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that idea. So before we go to the next part, Katherine, an important question which I bet people are wondering about, I bet you're wondering about this, what about the kids?
Great question. That's our fourth myth, is that divorce damages children. So studies actually show that what does do damage is hostility that's left festering and unresolved between both parents, either in a relationship or out of a relationship. And I think that we believed this myth that divorce damages children because so many divorces are hostile. And even if they're not overtly so, they're kind of cold wars where there's a lot of unresolved resentment between people that can be kind of festering in the field between us. And children are little energy sponges. We think children are more resilient than they are because they're not talking about their conflicts and their problems, but they're absorbing everything. So what John Gottman actually showed us in some studies that he did is that even intact families where there's abusive dynamics and the parents are unkind to each other and they're not together working as a team, that the children will show the same kinds of problems: truancy, drug abuse, smoking cigarettes, clipping classes, dropping out of school, promiscuity, all of these things that kind of people will say that divorce does to children, but it's actually the unresolved conflicts between parents.
That's fascinating. So it's not divorce that actually might hurt a child. It's the conflict between parents. And that conflict can happen during a divorce. So a bad divorce, yes, can be damaging to a kid, but a bad marriage is also damaging to a kid. But if you do conscious uncoupling and you have that beautiful competition of kindness with your partner, that's actually healthy for the kids, if the previous version of your relationship was not.
Right, and the first 3 steps of conscious uncoupling are all about your internal work to get us to a place where we could do these acts of kindness. I mean, I think that people, all of us here are, we're believers in love and we do our inner work. We're evolutionaries at heart. We want to live in a conscious world and participate in building that world. But we don't always have access.
Right.
So, it's important to tell people that these acts of kindness are step 4 of the process. And so we have to start where we are, which for some of us is heartbroken and angry and frightened and tempted to do things that are uncharacteristically mean-spirited and all of those things that are kind of normal when we're going through a breakup. And get ourselves to the point where we actually could behave in a way that's aligned with our ethics as opposed to our very overwhelming emotions.
Wow. Now, what did it look like after your conscious uncoupling in terms of your relationship with your daughter?
Well, as soon as she knew that she wasn't going to lose contact with either one of her parents, she was actually fine with it. She was kind of even excited that she was going to get to have 2 bedrooms, and
That's so funny, because that was the same experience with my 2 children. So because we did the conscious uncoupling, we didn't feel like we needed to we haven't even spoken about custody, because that's not even a thing. So it's just such a beautiful thing. And I keep asking my children, because I guess deep down inside, I have that societally induced guilt a little bit. I'm like, hey, is this okay with you? And my son is almost, Dad, stop asking. Like, I'm totally cool with this. I want my 2nd bedroom.
Yeah, isn't that great? Well, I think, because you're still a family.
Yeah.
And so you didn't leave the children emotionally homeless.
Right.
And I think, we have this idea that as long as we're not fighting overtly, that it's somehow okay to have 2 separate families and 2 separate homes that really coordinate on a minimal level with each other. Mm-hmm. But you have to understand that from a child's perspective, they're always in a state of loss, because when they're going to mom's, then they're losing their family with dad. And when they're going to dad's, they're kind of losing their family with mom. So we're still putting them in the middle. It's not just overt fighting that can harm children. It's the lack of cohesion. That's why conscious uncoupling, as much as possible, encourages the creation of a happily even after family, a happy post-divorce family, where you really have a sense of expanded family and we're operating cohesively.
Happily even after. When we talk about the conscious uncoupling process, it is a 5-step process. On the program that we've designed with Mindvalley, it happens through 5 weeks. So for those of you who are enrolling in the program, we cannot wait to take you through this 5-week journey with Katherine. And I know it's going to be incredible for you if you're doing it by yourself. And if you're doing it with your partner, it's going to be incredible for both of you. And in this masterclass, we won't have time to go deep into the 5 steps. So we are going to go deep, however, in one key idea, so that in addition to the myths that we have dashed, you're going to get some interesting systems you can apply immediately. But first, can you give a quick overview of the 5 steps?
So step 1 is find emotional freedom, and that's where we start wherever you are. Whether you're in a place where you feel angry, you feel so bereft or hurt or depressed, we help you to get a handle on those very hot emotions that might actually tempt you to begin to behave in ways that are damaging to yourself, to your children, to other people. Because you have to remember that every choice you take, every action you take at this particular time, you're going to be living with the consequences for many years to come. So we want you being your best self in your power. And that means that we're going to actually teach you a process of how to transform your negative emotions into the fuel that you will need for positive change in your life. Step 2, reclaim your power in your life, is the step that we're going to explore more thoroughly today. And that has to do with being able to see clearly your part in things in a way that allows you to feel confident that you will never make these same mistakes again. Step 3, break the pattern and heal your heart. That's when we get down to the core beliefs that have played out in that relationship and caused you problems since you were too young to even remember. We're going to actually get to the core of those and graduate you from ever basing your adult relationships on the wounds of your past, so that you can actually feel confident you will graduate forever from any painful patterns you've struggled with in love. Step 4 is what we've been talking about a lot today, is becoming a love alchemist. It's awakening to yourself as a force of nature who has the power to recreate this relationship in a way that is wholesome and healthy for yourself and for others. That's even if you don't ever want to speak to your former partner again, because you don't want to be, thinking 5 years down the line, you're driving down the freeway and telling that person off in your mind. You want to be complete. You want to be at peace. You want to think of that person as a great teacher. Merritt Malloy once said that relationships that do not end peacefully do not end at all. So we want you to be consciously complete with that person. And then step 5, create your happy even after life. These have to do with these structures of how you're going to actually design your life moving forward in a way that creates well-being for yourself and for everyone involved in your relationship, extended community and family included.
Now, what we're going to do is we're going to touch on a little bit of step 2, reclaim your power in your life, so that you get a practical tool you can walk home with, and you also get a sense of how powerful Katherine's work is. If you decide you want to go deeper, you can enroll in the full program here on Mindvalley with thousands of other students on our Mindvalley Quest learning platform, which is the highest performing learning platform in terms of student results in the world. But more on that later. Now let's go a little bit deeper in an exercise and a concept from step 2, which is reclaim your power in your life. Now know that we are going out of step a bit. That's okay here, but this is a powerful tool I want you to experience.
So breakups can be one of the most traumatic things that we ever go through. And basically, what trauma is that something is happening in reality that's more than your psyche can integrate. So it's very normal during a breakup to be thinking obsessively about that person, to be trying to figure out every little moment, like how did it happen, when did it happen? Everything gets repositioned. You're trying to put the pieces together. And basically what you're trying to do is recover from the unbearable pain that you might be in, or the confusion, or how up is now down and down is now up. So obsessing about your former partner is a very normal part of overcoming this kind of trauma. However, the problem is that for most of us, we're going to be telling the story over and over again from a very victimized perspective. If things were unfair, if your partner was hurtful, if you experienced being lied to, if you feel like someone made a fool of you, all of these things are very hard to manage. And so our focus will go to the other person, and we will ruminate about how they should have done certain things or they shouldn't have done certain things. And so the problem with that is that then if our full attention is on the other person, we're not actually seeing our part. And it's only in seeing our part clearly that we're able to really move forward in a way in life where we know that this could never happen again. So 97%, the other person's fault. What was my 3%? See, any kind of reflection that has to do with shaming someone or even shaming ourselves, because you might even be blaming yourself. You might be angry at yourself and basically kind of ruminating on what is wrong with me, how could I do something so stupidly? But any kind of shame and blame conversation will only keep you stuck. You will not grow through this experience, and you will not be able to trust yourself and love moving forward. So the first thing that we want to do is have you recognize the resentments that you're struggling with. Now, most likely you resent your former partner, or maybe you resent yourself. And I know that all of us are conscious people. We want to move right to forgiveness. But when someone has really wronged you, and now you're suffering with the consequences of those mistakes that they made, you want to pause and take a moment and just acknowledge those feelings. So just take a moment even right now. Take out your journal. And you want to just notice where that lands in your body and just send love to that part of yourself. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes right now to just make this list of what you resent your former partner for, or maybe it's just that you resent yourself. But just take a moment to just write it out clearly. I resent so-and-so for, and then list what that person did to you. Okay, so now just send love to that part of you. Just take a deep breath. And just let's give it, 97% was that other person's fault. But what we want to look at right now is I want to invite you to turn your attention to yourself, just like Monique did. Clearly someone else was wrong, but she got curious about her part. How might I have been showing up in a way that prompted the other person to behave badly? How might I have given someone permission to treat me badly? How might their bad behavior of me be mirroring my own bad behavior towards me? In what ways might I have given my power away to that person? What motivated me to do that? So just take some time right now to reflect on the very often covert ways that you might have actually co-created this situation. You might have skipped over your own knowing. You might have had your first attention on the other person and always caretaking their feelings and their needs and abandoning your own, minimizing your own. Maybe you ignored the red flags because you wanted it to be one way and you just were refusing to hear the information that was coming to you. Just noticing your part, how you actually almost set the other person up to wound you in ways that actually you've been wounded before in life. So I'm just going to give you a few moments now to really self-reflect, to see if you can see that 3% clearly. And I want to give you one tip. Make sure that you're looking at the behavioral aspect and not just the feeling. So for example, you might say, well, I always think that I'm alone and no one's going to be there for me. And then of course he wasn't. That's more like a feeling based. You want to look for the actual way that you showed up. In other words, well, I always just assume that no one will ever be there for me. So I never really tell anyone what I need from them. I never let anyone really find their way into my world. I'm rarely vulnerable. I pretend I have it all together. And then of course they don't show up for me. Right? So look for that behavior that you've been engaged in that would make up your 3%. So just write down, my 3% of this dynamic is, and just write as many answers as come to you in that. So I'm going to give you a few moments to do that now. Okay, welcome back. So it's hard to face that, but here's the thing. There's a huge cost to yourself in showing up this way. You've probably been engaging that behavior because you've been compensating in some way. If you don't feel worthy of love, maybe you've overgiven your love to someone, and your response to not being loved by someone is to love twice as much. So you'll probably likely see certain things that are going on a deeper level that have been causing you to show up in these ways that are compensating for something. We're going to get to that in the next step of conscious uncoupling. For right now, what I want you to see is the cost to yourself in showing up this way, and to make an amends to yourself moving forward. Meaning that you actually see it clearly. From this moment forward, you declare to yourself, I will never dismiss my own deeper knowing. From this moment forward, I will always ask the questions that I need to ask in order to feel safe. From this moment forward, I will always make sure that giving is reciprocal and that it's not just me doing all the giving. From this moment forward, I will trust my deeper knowing, and I will act on my knowing immediately. So just take a moment now to think, what's the amends that you can make to yourself that will begin to restore your ability to trust yourself moving forward? See, a lot of times in a breakup, we'll say, I don't really trust men anymore, or I don't really trust women anymore. I don't trust love anymore. But really what you're saying is, I don't trust myself anymore. So this amends is about restoring your ability to trust yourself. What action can you take from this moment on that will let you know that you are a different person, that this could never happen again? So just take a moment right now to write that down in your journal. The amends to myself that I am making from this moment forward is. I'm just going to give you a few moments to think about that and write that down. Beautiful work. So now I want to encourage you to actually put into action immediately that amends. So whether that be with your coworkers, your friends, your boss, whoever you need to set a boundary with or speak up to, or just immediately put that into action so that you begin to build credibility and trust with yourself that this breakdown in relationship could never happen again moving forward, because you are now a person who shows up in integrity with the truth of who you are.
Katherine, thank you. What you just experienced was a tiny slice, an extremely tiny slice of the week 2 process, which is on reclaiming your power. So let's do a quick recap of what we've covered so far. The first thing is, we examined 4 belief systems that modern society has programmed us to believe, but that we argue should not exist. And these belief systems, when you open your eyes to the idea that they may actually be bold lies that were inherited generation from generation, when you wake up to these 4 beliefs, you find that you can approach the ending of a relationship in a far healthier, more conscious way. The first false belief is the happily ever after myth, that every relationship is meant to last forever and that you should feel guilt or shame should that relationship end. The second big false belief is that it is okay to hate the person you once loved, to go from soulmate to soul hate, that blaming your partner is the way to complete things somehow, and that you must find flaws with your partner. The third belief that we encourage, that we discard collectively as a society, is that time will heal everything. It's not true. You need to take some action to heal and to recover and to complete any wounding from your past broken relationships that you might still be carrying with you. The final belief, and this is a big one, is that divorce is bad for kids. It is not. A bad marriage is bad for kids. A bad divorce is bad for kids. When you consciously uncouple, and the key word here being consciously, it can be healthier for the children than the alternative, which is being part of a bad relationship. Those are 4 beliefs that we have attempted to eliminate and end in this masterclass. I would encourage you to think and meditate on these beliefs. Now, if this is a lot, don't worry, because when you go deeper in the program, we go deep into these beliefs and you get exercises and tools to completely heal yourself of these beliefs, plus several other beliefs that are programmed in us from the time we are little children about relationships that actually can lead to dysfunction as an adult. And now we went into a 3-step process of journaling to help you reclaim your power. So thank you for being with us. And I know many of you cannot wait to enroll in the 5-week program for conscious uncoupling. Keep in mind, this is not just for you if you are going through a divorce. This is for you if you're going through a breakup, or if you sense that you're at that stage where you might need to consider moving on in your relationship and you want to do so without the pain and in a conscious way. This program is also for you, and check in with yourself. It's also for you if you know that in the past you had an ugly breakup. It may have happened 20 years ago, or 10, or it may have happened last year, but you know that there is some stuff from that that you need to heal, not just for your sake, but for the sake of your partner. And also keep this in mind. As Katherine said, your next relationship won't begin when you meet your next partner. It begins with how you end your previous relationship. Do not go forth carrying the baggage, the pain, and the unconscious trauma of your past relationships. Go forth through the conscious uncoupling process so that you can make your next relationship truly extraordinary and great. And all of this happens in this 5-week program. Conscious uncoupling is a process that has now influenced millions of people across the globe to heal from a breakup or a divorce in a conscious way. So if you were to take a private consultation with Katherine, it would cost about $1,500 for an hour. A full-on counseling session with her for you and your partner would be upwards of $10K. What we try to do at Mindvalley is to bring the wisdom from these world's extraordinary teachers and make it accessible to masses. I've gone through a conscious uncoupling, and I can tell you it has saved me. It has changed the nature of what could have been a horrible breakup into something so healthy and powerful for me, my ex, my loved ones, my kids, and everyone close to us. And it's made us better human beings. And I know that this is something we want to bring to the world. And so by working with Katherine, we've created a 5-week conscious uncoupling program on the Mindvalley Quest platform. And because of the economies of scale, since tens of thousands of people will be going through this, we're able to bring the price down to something so affordable. And not only that, but as a special thank you for investing the last hour with us in this masterclass, below this video, you can enroll at a special additional unlock price only available today. So right now you have 2 options. You can choose to leave with what you've learned here, or you can choose to go deeper and complete that entire process. I can tell you that there is an incredible power, there's an incredible new you waiting for you at the end of this 5 weeks. And not only is this going to be transformative and healing for you, but it's going to be transformative and healing for everyone in your life who was connected to you because of your relationship, from friends to family to parents to kids. And it'll graduate you from any painful patterns you've struggled with. Katherine, how would you describe this 5-week program?
I think that for any of you who care about having love in your lives, who are committed to a future of health and happiness no matter what has happened to you in the past, who want to graduate from any painful, toxic dynamics that you've seen relationally and awaken to your power to create health and happiness in love, that conscious uncoupling is actually the way to go, that can complete any former dynamics that you've struggled with in love and open you up to deep happiness that you so desire and deserve to have.
So let me give you an idea of what this program involves. Firstly, 5 steps over 5 weeks. Every day, each week, you go deep into one of these steps. Now, the Mindvalley Quest platform is known for some of the best results in the entire transformational industry because of 3 unique features. Number 1, really high quality filmmaking, storytelling, and learning experience design. We don't just work with Katherine, we bring in world-class experts to work with Katherine to create a curriculum that transforms you over this 35-day program. The second thing is, it's really easy on your time. We know we're all busy. You have kids, you have jobs, you have careers, and so our program is designed to inspire you, educate you, train you, reprogram you in around 20 minutes a day. So all you have to do is log into the app in around 20 minutes, frequently less every single day for 35 days. And the third key advantage here is that you are not doing this alone. The Mindvalley community is super supportive. This program starts on a specific date. The start date is below this video, and thousands of people are going to enroll together, and you'll be connected to them through an online community. Every time you need help, there's someone there for you. Everything is strictly confidential, but you have people there supporting you and holding your hands. In addition, we have trained facilitators and coaches embedded in this community. So you're not just learning passively, you get to engage, to communicate, to talk. Our communities are so rich with deep friendships and connection that we are starting to see Mindvalley meetups happen all across the world from people who form these deep connections within the community. You will get to connect with men and women who are going through a similar experience with you and who are there, completely heart-centric, there to support you and each other on this profound journey. This is what makes Quest one of the highest performing learning platforms in the world, to the point where it's now being deployed in schools and companies globally. Now, this is what the 5 weeks look like. The first week is on finding emotional freedom. The second week is on reclaiming your power and your life. In week 3, we go on to breaking the pattern and healing your heart. Week 4 is about becoming a love alchemist. And week 5 is on creating your happy even after life.
So this is how it's structured, is that Monday through Saturday, we're going to be together every single day for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. And I'm going to give you an exercise, and you're going to be able to deepen into the thing that's the most important thing to do that day in terms of staying on track for this miraculous process. And then on Sunday, we'll have a day of rest and integration where I get to answer some of your questions, so that by the end of our process together, you are going to be free, you are going to be absolutely complete, and you are going to trust yourself moving forward in love to actually do it in a way that is healthy and sets you up for happiness for years to come.
Now, I want you to know that you get to actually try out this program completely risk-free. Anybody can enroll in any Mindvalley program and take it up to day 10 completely risk-free, so you don't even have to make up your mind right now. If anytime before day 10 you decide this isn't for you, simply go to mindvalley.com/refund, and instantly you get to give yourself a refund. So you don't have to make up your mind. You can try it and decide. Enroll and then issue yourself a refund if you feel this isn't right for you. After you enroll, you're going to get an email with your login and password. If you're an existing Mindvalley customer, you can use your existing login and password. Just go to mindvalley.com, click login, and you'll be at our learning center. And the Conscious Uncoupling Quest will be there for you. Before the official start date, you'll have available to you some warm-up videos to watch. This is just educational content for you to browse before the program starts. On the day the program starts, you're ready to begin this journey. I recommend you download the accompanying Mindvalley app. The app is available on Android and Apple. In fact, just last month, Apple featured this app as App of the Day. It is a beautifully put together app. And what this means is that your 20 minutes or less a day you can listen to as you're commuting, or in the gym, or on the treadmill, or shopping for groceries. Just open up the app, log in, and automatically the app will know what day you're at and will issue that content for you. Now, after you finish the program, all the content, all the recordings are there for you permanently. So if you miss a lesson, there's no issue, you can always go back. Directly from the app, you can also access the community and interact with other students. And if you have any questions, there are facilitators, real-world people ready to help you. That is one of the most beautiful things about this. Now, in addition to all of this, we have several unique bonuses for this particular program. The first bonus is we are staffing our community with trained facilitators who can help you on this journey. So you have direct access to trained conscious uncoupling experts who are there to help support you in the community. Second, you're going to get bonus meditations. Even after this program, you'll have access to these meditations to listen to whenever you need them. Katherine, what can you say about these meditations?
Oh, the meditations will drop you right into your heart. They're very comforting. They help you to alleviate the pain that you're in. They will help to alleviate the anxiety that you're in. They'll keep you on course. You can listen to them throughout the day whenever you need to, and they'll take you through each one of the steps of the conscious uncoupling process.
Beautiful. The third bonus is a workbook. This workbook is where you can apply your journaling practices. The final bonus is truly unique. We don't always do this for our Mindvalley Quest programs, but Katherine generously offered this. Every Sunday, we're going to have a bonus session with Katherine. If you're part of the first class, Katherine is going to be delivering this live with students. If you join later, you will see a recording. But what you will get is a 1-hour episode with Katherine, interacting with students, helping take them through the process. And there's so much wisdom you can extract for that. Again, you can watch that directly on your app as you're commuting to work. So it's easy to fit this hour into your already busy lives. It's always amazing to me when I hear the stories of what conscious uncoupling has done for people. Not just Gwyneth Paltrow and the celebrities, but from people around the world who have gone through this process. Deborah Poneman said, "It's a definitive blueprint on how to complete a relationship in a way that leaves everyone honored and empowered. You'll discover a graceful parting of the way is doable, even under the most extreme of circumstances." I know Deborah, and I know the difficult divorce she went through, and this was incredible for her. And Marcy Shimoff said, with amazing clarity and depth, Katherine will take the splinter out of your soul and support you to end your relationship in a way that leaves you and those you care about whole and complete rather than broken and damaged. I know Marcy, and it was wonderful how your work was able to support her. She raves about you. In addition to that, let's share Lily's story with the audience.
Great. Well, I love to talk about Lily because, you know, she did the conscious uncoupling process all by herself. She was dating someone for about 6 months, this very nice man named Jason. And out of the blue, he just ghosted her after 6 months of seeing each other. And she was beside herself. She wanted desperately to talk to him and find out why he didn't want to be in a relationship with her, and he just blocked her at every level and basically just kind of abandoned the relationship. So you can imagine that when I met her, she was incredibly incomplete, really frustrated, just kind of tearing her hair out trying to figure out what had happened. So when she did conscious uncoupling, though, and she was able to kind of look at herself and how she was showing up in that relationship, it suddenly became very clear. It didn't excuse his bad behavior, but she got gold out of that experience because what she saw is that she was showing up in that relationship with him in a way that was really about her trying to kind of get her old wounds met. Her father was very negligent and he abandoned her a lot. So she just would insatiably crave his attention, crave validation, always want sexual validation from him in a way that was almost like she was a needy child looking to be reparented as opposed to a woman who is available to partner. And then she could also see the signs where he kept trying to tell her, he kept trying to ask her for what she needed, but she was so focused on just getting what she wanted, when she wanted it, the way she wanted it, that she actually didn't hear him. So when she was able to see her part really clearly, she could make an amends to herself moving forward, that she was now going to show up in her maturity as an adult, as a grown woman. And she was going to actually really look and complete those things with her dad so that she didn't bring them into her adult relationships anymore. And now she's in the best relationship she's ever been in. And she even got to go back and complete that hurt with Jason, and they were able to forgive each other so that they could understand and leave each other in a more wholesome place.
Now, firstly, if you are already knowing that this is right for you, go ahead, scroll down below and enroll.
Get ready for it. Get ready for it. Get ready for it. Yeah, this is it. Go! 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 Yeah, this is it. Go! Let's go! This is it. Go! Let's go! This is it.
And what I want to do right now, Katherine, is answer some frequently asked questions. Now, the first and most common question we get is, do I need to do this with my partner?
Absolutely not. I'd say that most of the people who do it are people who are just coming in as an individual. Sometimes people don't even ever want to speak to that person again, which, you know, if someone behaves really badly is understandable. We don't have an agenda that you need to be friends. We don't have an agenda that you need to stay connected. We certainly don't have an agenda that you need to do it as a couple, but if you do it as an uncoupling couple, we have certain instructions for you that we've created just for you. So we give you guidance on how best to do that. But truthfully, the majority of people who come into the program are single and are just struggling with a hurting heart.
I see. Now, the second question is this relevant if I don't have children or if I'm not married?
Absolutely, and as a matter of fact, in many ways, I'd say it's if you want to be in a couple, a happy, healthy relationship, I would say that it's kind of mandatory, because you want to be able to turn your breakup into, which is really the worst thing for many people that's ever happened to them, but you want to be able to turn it into the best thing that's ever happened, and that's always going to have to do with wisdom gained and lessons learned that you can now pay forward into your next relationship. You don't want to take unfinished business from a past partner into your new relationship, because you will sabotage that relationship. You want to go into your next relationship clear, wise, having healed that wound, and having been, you know, all the more capable of loving because of it.
Next question is, I got divorced over 5 years ago. Will this still help?
It is never too late to have a conscious uncoupling. I've had people come in and do the process, you know, decades after.
And you don't need your other partner there.
You do not need that person there.
It's a personal process.
It's a very personal process, but I will say that I've met people who many years after a bad breakup had not even had so much as a date. And very often we've been able to trace it back to their heart. They thought the time could heal everything, and they thought that eventually they'd get to a place, you know, where they would find love again, and they just didn't, and they didn't know why it wasn't happening until they did conscious uncoupling, and then they kind of saw all of the covert ways they had shut down, that they were guarded, that they were pushing people away even though they desperately wanted love. So I encourage people to come at any time to conscious uncoupling so that you can actually be free to open your heart and have love in your life. It's too big a cost to pay to never let anyone close to you again because you've been hurt in the past. And anyone who's gone through a broken heart knows that they never want that to happen again. So conscious uncoupling will actually have you be able to heal that wound in a way that has you feel safe to open your heart up to another person again.
Beautifully said. Now, what if, this is the question we got. The question is, what if I'm hoping to get back with my partner?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, a lot of people do end up recoupling after doing conscious uncoupling, because one of the things that the program does, and this is why I can so clearly say that you will have an experience where you can trust yourself moving forward to do this differently, is that I'm teaching you almost inadvertently, as I'm taking you through the healing process, some core skills that are necessary for healthy relationships. So, you know, like the self-soothing that happens in the first week, or the ability to take personal responsibility in the second week or the third week, where we look at your core wounds and how that's been playing out in relationships and how you become conscious of that in such a way that you don't do that anymore. All of these things create good relationships. So very often people will end up recoupling. However, what I suggest is that you come in without an agenda, that you really come in to complete the dynamic of that relationship. Because if you do end up recoupling, it's going to be a different relationship with that person. So just keep your focus on yourself and on doing the process and let go of the outcome.
Next question is, what if I'm in a relationship and I'm just thinking of leaving?
I think it's very smart of people to come in to do conscious uncoupling as preventative medicine. How can I make sure that this is going to go well so that our family stays intact, or so that I don't devastate the other person? And you're going to get some really good tools about how to keep things on track, to do this in a mindful, kind, and respectful way.
And finally, how is the online program different from, say, reading the book?
Well, the online program is just not to be compared. I mean, the opportunity to be with other people, to hear the sound of my voice, to see me with you every day on demand, and also to be supported by the experts, the conscious uncoupling experts who are there. It's going to be a completely different experience and will expedite your healing. I always recommend doing it in community.
It's a form of personal healing as well as group therapy.
Yeah.
And it's powerful how this process can so transform your life. So I'm so glad you came into our lives, Katherine.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you guys for joining in. And for those of you who are enrolling in the program, I cannot wait to see you. Katherine can't wait to see you. And I know this is going to be an amazing journey for you. So scroll down below, click enroll, and we'll see you on the next page with full instructions on how to get started with the Conscious Uncoupling program. And remember, as a thank you for investing the last hour with us on this masterclass, you've unlocked a special price, so don't close this page. Scroll down below. The enroll button is there with your special unlock price. Thank you all for being part of the Mindvalley community. So delighted that you could join us today, and I know we'll be seeing you again pretty soon.